Hello, beautiful moms and entrepreneurs. My name is Charisse Walker, and I'm your host of the Unbreakable Mompreneurs podcast. This is a place where we come together to learn, grow, and inspire. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. Hello, Unbreakable Mompreneurs. I am Charisse Walker, your host, and today I'm here with Leigh Shulman. And Leigh has quite the story, and I just am so excited to hear about it and to talk about if you've ever wanted to follow your dreams, she is one of those people that you need to listen to. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thank you, Charisse. That was such a sweet, lovely way to hear it because, when you talk about following your dreams, sometimes following your dreams is hard.
Yeah.
It's painful. It could be a little difficult, so it doesn't feel like following your dreams.
Right.
But yes, I think the dream that you're talking about was that I used to live in Brooklyn and just sort of got tired of it there. It wasn't for me. So we packed everything up that we were keeping, sold everything, and left to travel. And then made our way to Argentina, where I live. I've been living here for the last almost, I'd say 13, 14 years now. And I built my writing business from here, my writing and writing coaching business from the other side of the planet for most of my clients.
Wow, that's amazing. And you saw the Twin Towers fall, right?
I did. And that was, it's funny because I think partially because I moved and now in Argentina, 9/11 is Teachers' Day. And I've sort of adopted it, which I love. And every Teachers' Day, like at the schools, I was volunteer with another mom to buy presents for all the teachers, because for me, it takes what was such an awful, awful day and turns it in and sort of reworks it, revisits it in a way that, what better way, what do the opposite of what 9/11 was than to celebrate teachers and learning and education. But I did see it. I saw it happen. I was home. It was, it was a day because I either worked from home or I was teaching at universities. And it was earlier in the morning. So I was on the couch doing whatever. And I heard this huge boom. And I was like, what was that? So I went to check to see if there was anything online. And I saw the headline, 2 airplanes hit the Twin Towers. But I couldn't click on it because our internet signal was from the top of the Twin Towers. So we're like, I said to my husband, I'm like, oh, this thing, I mean, there was no way I felt it was real. I was like, it's another headline. I'm like, well, why don't we go to the roof? Because we lived right across the river. We're in Brooklyn, right across the river from the Twin Towers. So we went up and we just saw these 2 big buildings with a massive burn mark on each side, huge plume of smoke. And then they just fell. And I actually went back and got my camera because I thought I'm going to want to remember exactly this moment. Took a photo. And then when they started falling, and then this huge cloud of debris kind of came toward us. We're like, oh yeah, we should probably go in now. None of this looks good. And it was, I don't think about it very much anymore. I think I'm lucky in that sense. It doesn't really, it's almost like not that I've forgotten that it happened, because it was such a life-changing moment. And then the weeks and months after were life-changing also. But it taught me, safe is a relative term. And when we cling to the things that keep us, what we think are safe, they're not necessarily keeping us safe at all. I thought I was living, as a stay-at-home mom. I was teaching. Had I returned to teaching? No, in 2001, I didn't have a kid yet. And it was 9/11 that made me decide, okay, let me actually have a child now. And I know a lot of people went the other direction, but I sort of felt like, yeah, this is something I want to do. And it's like, either do it or not. And so I made the decision. And then that sort of led to the next step of living in New York isn't really fun with kids. For me, it wasn't. It was too much. And then that led to, but where do we go? I don't know. Let's travel, which had always been something I kind of dreamed of doing. But I think kind of seeing anything can happen at any time. I might as well do what I want to do. I mean, traveling and open-ended across the world couldn't be worse or more. It's not more dangerous than the Twin Towers falling.
And to unpack that, there's so much there because I remember I was teaching college at the time, and I remember I didn't have to be at school till I think noon, because I taught 4 hour blocks, so it was like 1 to 5, and then 6 to 10, and or 8 to 12, and I remember it coming down, and I was teaching sociology at the time. What better topic, right? And so,
Right.
like, are we canceling? What are we doing? Because this is a national crisis. What the heck is happening? And they're like, no, you still have to teach your class. And I think it was talking about race and diversity. And I mean, somehow the topic just didn't seem right for that day. And so I remember going into class thinking, okay, you guys, we have 4 hours. We're gonna have to talk about something. And so I think that and then 3 weeks later, I had the opportunity to go to New York. And I gotta tell you, like it is life-changing. I cannot imagine being there that day. But I remember when we got off the subway and we came upstairs, we came up to ground level, it was so quiet. Like it was almost as if you were in church and nobody was talking. Very few people were there, and we walked as close as you could get, and it's still smoldering 3 weeks later. And then I remember this Levi's company that we walked by, and it was pure ash except for where items had been, and jewelry stores, like perfect lines where the jewelry was, where the Levi's were. And I wish I had a babysitter that's taught for me. Like I went through a divorce, she stole my camera, and I'm like, I don't care. Like, just give me that SD card. So I don't even have those pictures anymore. Of course, I'm like, I don't care. I'm not going to press charges. I just 900 pictures that were gone because of that. And so I have my memory, but that's it. And I think for me, I do love to travel. And that's why I think I admire you so much, because I have had the opportunity to go all over the world. And what that teaches you and what you learn from other people makes you grateful for what you have, right? Because you're in Argentina. My brother was there for 2 years, and it's much different than it was in New York, or it is in New York, right?
Yeah, completely. Especially, I mean, we lived in Brooklyn, and now, I mean, you can't see, like, right. I'm sitting here, and right there's the window, and on the other side is basically just the fields and a mountain, and where people leave their cows and horses, completely different, and
Right.
on a dirt road, completely different than New York.
And
So
I
I'm
think
sorry, continue what you were saying.
no, that's what it is. I mean, perspective is everything. And I think that sometimes when you live in this bubble, I used to live in DC, and I've met people that have lived there their whole life, and they'd never been to the mall. And for those people that don't know what the mall is, that's where all of the monuments are, and the Capitol and the White House. And so I'm like, how can you live so close? And there's that history. And so I think that for people learning to embrace the moment, which is what you did, and that's what I admire. And you just said, this isn't for us anymore, and so you moved. So I admire that. I think it's fantastic. So
It's a philosophy that I try to keep too, because it's easy to forget. It's
right.
really easy. Because like, I mean, we are settled now. Our kids are in school,
Mhm.
where we have our daily routines.
Mhm.
And I think it's really easy to fall into them. And then when something changes, to be like, oh, wait, I don't want this change. And I try really hard to be very easy with change.
Mhm.
Argentina is a good place for that because things change at the last minute a lot here. So, but in good ways. I mean, not necessarily bad. Like, for example, this year, school was supposed to start at the end of February. And the night before, we got messages from the school being like, it may be delayed a week. We'll let you know. So, literally, the morning of, we're like,
Wow.
okay, are the kids going to school? And then they delayed it a week. And it was a national change. So, it wasn't just
Mhm.
our school, it was all over.
Mhm.
And, I think it's a choice to accept it and to be okay with something that simple. Their different
Mhm.
choices are big and small, and
Mhm.
changes are big and small. But in that case, we just kind of embraced it as, oh, great, another week of summer and another week to sleep late. And that was that.
Wrapping my head around that it starts in February instead of September or August. I'm like,
That too, yeah. Yeah.
so that alone is different. Okay, so you moved, and then you started writing, right? And so you wrote the writer's roadmap. So what made you get into that?
Well, I've been writing for as
Mhm.
long as I can remember, but I think it was when we were traveling that I started taking it really seriously. I mean, I went to grad school I went to grad school. I have a master's in literature and writing, but it's funny to say that was before 9/11, but I just didn't really take it seriously. But when we started traveling and I wanted to sort of find a way to make money while traveling, right, I started, I just started talking to people. Well, how do you do this? And I started a travel blog and started meeting all these people and kind of realized the key is to just, you have to just put yourself out there. And I think it's again that fear of like, how, oh, I'm going to write something, isn't any good. Where do I send it? I don't know what I'm doing. And I think that holds people back to a large extent. Like we feel like we have to know more than we already know in order to write. I think in order to do a lot of things, it's easy to hold yourself back and like, oh, I need to learn this, or I first have to do this. But writing is something great in the sense that you can just jump in and do it.
Yeah.
And a lot of writing and publishing is trial and error, and just kind of, you don't know how to pitch a magazine. I can tell you all the details of it. I can even give you feedback, but you don't know how to pitch a magazine until you've written a pitch and sent it to an editor.
Right.
And then you learn very quickly, hey, I shouldn't have said this way. I know this, or that really worked. This is really great. And the things that you learn, I mean, I'm all for having mentors and I'm all for getting advice and feedback. I think that's crucial. So I'm definitely not saying do it on your own, but I am saying, I think that step of trusting, just letting go to trust yourself enough to just try something that you have no idea what you're doing is a really wonderful thing to do. So it's scary, but wonderful.
And I think that's the intuition, because I'm writing a book. It comes out in a week and a half. I cannot believe it.
Oh, wow.
And I know but it's a 2-year process, right? And I did hire this coach, but I was thinking that they were going to be reading my stuff and giving me feedback. And no, that's not the process. And so they're like, well, you need to go find these readers. And so I'm like, put it on Facebook, who wants to read this chapter? And I got people to come back, but then I realized, what experience do they have other than their consumer, so they can tell me what they think, but yet they don't want to hurt my feelings. So it's like, good job, Charisse, way to go. Like, it's not beneficial for me, but the intuition comes in. It's like, well, what do I really want to say? And that's what's important to me. That's my message that I'm trying to get out. And so do I care how it is received? And did you interpret what I intended? And so that was important. But I do agree with you that your intuition, because I did have proofreaders look over it later and he's giving feedback. I'm like, no, that's not, you completely changed what I wanted to say there. So it is important to stand your ground and still feel like, nope, this is what I wanted. Sorry.
No, yeah, I think that's 100% right, because I mean, like I said, I am a big believer in feedback, and the book that I just wrote, I did pay someone to give me feedback on the whole book. And I found her feedback to be fantastic. It was, I read through her list of things. I'm like, yes, 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 yes. And it was a very natural yes. But in those times where you're like, no, that's not what I meant. It's so important to take what you want and not what other people want. So it is. So even when somebody is telling you, oh, this isn't quite working, it's still your instinct and your intuition saying, yeah, I agree with that. And that for me, that always has to come first. There's actually somebody I've been working with on a book. It's a fiction book. It has it's a complicated book because it has 3 timelines. Oh, wow. And the characters are reincarnated. So there's a sense of like, you have to let your readers know where you are and when you are at every point, which is a challenge. And it's her first book. And I just kept, there were points in it when we'd be working on it where I would say, you haven't convinced me yet, but she was sure. But that's a different thing than saying, no, this doesn't work. Right. It's not there yet. I'm not seeing what you're seeing yet. But she continued and she was adamant that this is how it's going to be. And it worked. It really did work. And it was just another reminder to me that, yeah, trust your instinct is probably the best advice that I could give for writing, and probably most other things too.
Well, and I think it's good that you have eyes. Like this one lady, she fact checked a lot of stuff that made me so paranoid. I went back through the entire book. I'm like, oh my gosh, I was wrong. Using Pat from Saturday Night Live instead of Stuart Smalley when I'm like, I'm good enough. Gosh, golly, people like me. Could have been completely wrong. So I do think it's important, like you said, that you do need to have the feedback. And, me thinking there is a mustard tree, but there's no mustard trees. There's only mustard bushes, right? And so I'm like, thank you for not making me look stupid. So what is the best way to start writing a book? What's your advice?
All right. So what I said before, where it's literally just start writing. Okay, I'm going to talk about more than one way. I
Right.
think take a pen. You've got ideas in your head, dump them onto the paper. I mean, so many people I know, most people don't just kind of like, oh, I want to write a book, and then they come up with the idea after. Most people have an idea that they've been rolling around for a really, really long time in one way or another. And I meet a lot of people who tell me, like, I've been wanting to write this book my whole life, and now I'm finally doing it, or but I don't know how to start, or and there's a lot of ways we talk ourselves out of writing books.
Mhm.
So in that sense, I think taking what's in your head and putting it on paper is paper. When I say paper, I mean it could be on
Yeah.
your computer, it could be on your phone, in your journal, however.
Write it down.
Because there is this translation process. It is very, I mean, it is very much like learning a second language,
Yeah.
where you have it in your head and you might have endless information in your head, but the second you go to write it down, you kind of freeze a little bit because you're having to filter it and translate it. And what I recommend is just get it down. Don't even, and definitely don't try to make it perfect, because you will get blocked. Perfection will block you.
Yeah.
This applies to everything, I think, also. If you try to, like, perfection literally doesn't exist. So if you try to be perfect, you will not be able to do what you want to do. So let yourself be a mess, let it be whatever it is, get it on paper without editing it, without self-editing, without seeing if you can get rid of that critical editor and get it on paper. But then what I also do there, so you want to start writing a book. So I'm a big believer in sort of, that chaos of creativity where you just get it all out, dump it all down, see what happens. But to do that for an entire book, and I learned this the hard way, because I always wrote my short stories where I would write, okay, I know I want this, I want this, I want that. And I would write all these different pieces, and then I would kind of put them back together.
Mhm.
So for like a 4-page short story, I might have 15 pages of writing. Some of it's repeated, some of it's nonsense. And then I can pull things out. That does not work for a book,
Mhm.
because suddenly I had 400 pages and there was no way to piece the story together by all this stuff, because I couldn't keep it all together. So what I've started doing is I kind of mix, and I think the chaos part where you're just dumping and you're working on inspiration, or you're just letting things happen as they happen, is crucial. And often that kind of, I call it chaos because it can be very messy, and it can also feel like it's bad. I think we have that inner critic that's like, oh, this is no good, this is no good. And I think that the process of dumping it on paper, helps you tame that inner critic,
Mhm.
because you have to literally say, stop doing that. Because very often what you put on paper is actually really wonderful. But if you judge it before you've got it down, or you've written a little bit more, or you've given it space, you're likely to get rid of something that actually you would have really wanted to use.
Mhm.
But then there's the organization part, and I've developed a lot of different tools for that. I call them tools because I think of them as measurements. Like I have what's two different 5-step cheat sheets, one for a fiction book, one for a nonfiction book, where it takes you step by step. Like, what is your book about? And I mean both what is the topic, what's going to happen in it, but also what is it that you want your readers to understand and feel when they're finished reading. And then there's different ways and then, when you're really deep in a book, there are different ways. I use a lot of different tools from StoryGrid or from Save the Cat, or my own ways that sort of lay out the book. All right, you want to have this piece, so you need to show the ordinary world, and then you're going to have an inciting incident, and you're going to have this scene and that scene, and they do tend to go in a pretty specific order. Do you have them? Are they there? Do you need to add something? Is this working for you? And sort of to go back and forth between the chaos and the control,
Mhm.
and recognizing, and I think also very good at, one of my favorite pieces of advice is trust yourself, keep going. You're a terrible judge of your own. If you think your work is bad, you're a terrible judge of your work, because
Mhm.
nobody's work is,
Right.
I've really not met anybody whose work is bad.
Yeah.
Never. So I doubt anybody listening or whoever, if you think, oh, maybe I am, no, you're not. You're not the exception to the rule.
Mhm.
And, and if there is somebody listening who wants something more hands-on, just email me, message me, talk to me, because I'm always happy to talk to people and point them in different directions of books, or if you want to work together, or if you want to join my writing community. They're all different methods of getting your book done, because it's really hard to write a whole book and go through that process without a community around you. It's doable,
I agree.
but having a community really, it's key to helping you move forward in a lot of different ways.
Because you're getting feedback and you're getting different ideas. I think because I started with, I think, 75,000 words. And when I went back through, they're like, you got to cut this to 60. I'm like, what? And then you start thinking, this has no business in this chapter, like, the title, and this has no business. And so what I realized is I actually had 3 books in one. And so I'm like, okay, deleted sections. And so I'm not going to like completely delete. I created a new folder and kept it all in there because that's going to go in my next book that I'm writing. That's an offshoot of this one. So I agree. You do have ideas, and as long as you're getting them down and don't delete, just maybe they don't belong in that book. And I think the other thing is a book, just like a singer, right? There's some singers out there that I'm like, oh my gosh, that voice is just horrible. How are they ever popular? And some people love them. Not I, said the fly. And so same thing with a book. Some people it totally resonates with, and for other people it doesn't. And so like my husband writes these cute little short stories for kids, and his sister's like, this is horrible. It's never a good thing, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, she's not a kid. Our kids love these stories. Like, get them out there. And so it's good feedback, but then take it with a grain of salt as well. Like, it might not be, that's their opinion, but that doesn't mean it's the right opinion.
Right. And I would even say, like, a book that everybody loves. Well, I don't think that ever happens, but you don't want everyone to love your book. It doesn't really make sense. Like, let's say you're pitching a nonfiction book to an agent, an editor, and if you tell them that this book is for all audiences, they're pretty much going to reject you immediately because it's like, you don't understand who your book is for.
Right.
So whatever you're writing is for a very specific group of people. And if somebody outside your group hates it, who cares? It's irrelevant. And if somebody in your group, because the whole point is you are speaking to the people who need to hear you, which I actually want to, what's your book about?
About relationships, so I'm divorced. And so I just want young couples. So when you talk about who's it really for, specifically, if I had my wish, I would give it to every single young adult. Well, starting 18, 19, I think 18, they're still too young because they think that everyone can't tell them what to do. But 20, when they're starting to think that they want to get into a serious relationship, read this book. Because for me, like, we all have trauma, and that we don't really realize how that trauma affects us, and it affects especially our decisions for a relationship. So you see so many young people that they're in these relationships, you're like, this person's not good for you, and they don't see it, and because they're dealing with their own trauma. And then once they do, now they don't really get to the time or take the time to get to know the person. Nowadays, 70% of couples are moving in together, right? That's part of dating. It's my girlfriend. There's no long-term commitment. We're just dating. It's convenient to live together. Okay. Well, if you push that out, the statistics show that divorce is like 63% for those people. And so it's like, so my passion and my mission is to save marriage by starting the right way the first time. So that's what it's about.
And it sounds also, when you're talking about trauma, are you talking like the Harville Hendrix? You know who I'm talking about, and sort of like where they're talking about like relationship trauma and how we bring like whatever, not trauma like something massive happened, but little like traumas when you're growing up, and the things that you pick up, and the way that we attach to other people, so that our attachments to other people sort of come before the actual person and who we are. So we're literally seeing things that may not be there.
That, or we might be fearful of saying no, so we become codependent, and you don't know you're codependent, or you have issues because, like, whatever it is, maybe you were rejected by a friend in elementary school, and so now you don't let people in. Like, it doesn't matter. It's just there's trauma from low to high, right? And I'd prefer, because I'm not a psychologist or a counselor, so I'm not going to go to that horrible stuff that, because I'm not going to counsel on that. But yeah, if you were rejected by a parent, by a friend, or by this person, or if you experienced whatever type of issues that has, how has that, like, I want you to recognize that and see how it's carried into your life now. A good example, somebody, my friend, which is not me, but someone close to me, he's like, I want to grow up and be this person. And his dad told him at a young age, you'll never be good at that. So he's like, never going to be good at that. Can't do that. And so like for the rest of his life, his whole trajectory, he enjoyed that type of stuff, but he thinks he couldn't be good at it because his dad told him, like, no, that's not okay. And so it's just little things that experiences in your life, those, like, we all have those. What is that one or two or three experiences in your life that have affected you to be the person you are today, or that stands out? Because now we got to deal with that before you get into a relationship, because it'll come out and it could sabotage. I call it the iceberg. It's just sitting there waiting to tear into your ship, your relationship. That's
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. What a great book. I think it is very needed, because I mean, if you think about it, I mean, how much better to know who we are and what impacts us. I mean, before you're, married for 23 kids, because then you don't, it's much harder to navigate with somebody else.
Go ahead.
And I mean, I'm also going to say, like, a lot of the things that you're talking about resonate with me, because I think those are things that get in the way when people not even just writing. I mean, writing is one thing, but when I talk about writing, I'm talking about it in, like, you want to build a business around your writing. People who, when people say, can you make a living with writing? Well, yes. Not every, I think we have this idea, or people have this idea sometimes, that writing is, I'm going to be Stephen King, as opposed to, which some people are, but most people are not. But when you build a business around your writing, then you can make a living writing. And there's so many different ways of doing it. But in order to do that, you do have to know who you are, and you do have to be able to understand, like, I mean, quite frankly, I think therapy, whatever type of therapy is, and lots of book reading, like your book, relationship books, Who I Am books, Codependent, How to Set Boundaries, Saying No, all of those things are so important for relationships. But also, I think when it comes to writing, because writing is so personal, unless you're really writing just sort of trade magazine, like, I'm writing about this tire for this person because that's what they told me to write. It is so personal. And also, like, there's this sort of lore about what a good writer is. And I think we just, like you said about your friend, we shut ourselves off from it, whether somebody else has said something or whatever it is. We just said, like, oh, I'm not a good writer, or, oh, I can't write a book, or I can't do this, or, oh, I'd be scared to do that. And I think all of that is very tapped into the same types of trauma that impact us with our relationships too.
Yeah. And writing, I mean, that's why they always talk about keeping journals. For me, it was the best thing I ever could have done, because I did have to take 6 months off because I was reliving all this trauma that I had never really thought it's affected me as much as it did. But now, like, I feel like a totally different person, and completely, I'm happy, right? And I'm happy with who I am, and I'm happy. And I tend to look at my relationships differently now, because I used to be a very critical person. That's how I grew up, in a critical house. And so I think that now it's like, you know what, you live your life, you be you, it's okay. And so, should I offend you? You can't offend me. Like, you are entitled to your opinion. I'm entitled to how I interpret it. And so I'm not going to take it in a negative way, because I'm going to assume that that's not what you meant. And if it was, that's okay. And if not, I'll ask for clarification. So I think that things are so different, and writing, the fact that that's who you are and what you do for a living now, like, it's so vital and it's so important. So I just think it's fantastic.
Thank you. And I love doing it. And I also find that for me, writing and mentoring writing go hand in hand, in part because, I have my writing, I work one-on-one with people, and I also have a writing community, and we kind of check in every week. We do a lot of, there's sort of business type, or entrepreneur type check-ins, like, what's your plan for the week, and constantly sort of checking in, like, where are we, what are we going to do? But it is related to writing. And it holds me accountable too,
Mhm.
because if I'm not writing, if I'm not pitching, or like right now, I had stopped pitching for a while because I was working on a book, and now I picked it up again. And I don't really, I love writing books. I don't really enjoy pitching. So it's been this, for the last month, I set a goal of 4 pitches a week,
Mhm.
along with everything else that I'm doing. And it's been like very slow and a little painful. And I have my group where I am talking to them about it while they're talking to me about about things that are going on with them, the positive, the things that are working, the things that aren't working, and talking about, well, what's getting in the way and how do we do it? And it really holds me accountable. So the writing and the working with others, they're two sides of the same coin, and I love it.
That's great. That's fantastic. And when you say pitch, let's just like clarify it. It's where
Oh,
you're going and, well, I'll let you clarify because some people are like, what is she?
sure.
The B word is the
Yeah,
no.
and you're
Like
right too, because
pitch.
people use pitch different. People
Yeah.
use pitch very differently
Yes, I
too.
do. Hmm.
So when I say pitch, I very specifically mean writing a short couple paragraphs to the editor of a magazine to say, hey, can I write this article for you? Would you
Yes.
like this article for your magazine? Sometimes people use pitches to say they're pitching an editor and an agent with a
Mhm.
book. I differentiate from them just for my own purposes because it gets confusing otherwise. I call that a query. But yeah, I am actually querying a book too, but
Good.
that's more, it's like I have my information and I just know where to put it, and it doesn't change that much
Mhm.
depending on the query, whereas every pitch is going to be different.
And I
Every
think
article idea.
for those listening, in any business, you've got to maintain because they don't know you exist unless you get yourself out there. And so that's where your pitching comes from and for a week is fantastic. If it's one, that's great. If you went from zero, then start with one. But because you've been doing it for a while and four, that's and a goal that can be accomplished rather quickly in a week. And so those are the small goals that get you to where you want to be. So I think that's great as well.
Exactly. I think I was listening to another one of your podcasts. I think I don't, it was with Rebecca Scott, where she was talking about just 1%.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Just 1%. And I mean, I will say like 4 pitches is a lot for me.
Yeah.
It is. I specifically chose 4 because it feels scary. It feels like too much.
Hmm.
Then you also have to write them, and I have other things that I'm
You have
doing
to
when I'm
read.
working. Exactly. And like I said, it's not my favorite thing. So it takes me a while, and I have like one, browser. I have one browser with God knows how many tabs in each one for each article that I'm researching, and it's a little overwhelming, to be
Mhm.
honest. But I did shoot that. For me was sort of like a stretch because I wanted to push myself. But I think you're 100% right. Just one thing. You only need to know what is the next step.
Yeah.
What is the next thing you want to do? And if you just keep doing that, like, you get where you're going eventually.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I remember because I'm a realtor, I'm a lender, I'm an author. Like I squirrel syndrome, right? And so I was talking with the guy with my lending a little while ago, and he's like, "Okay, what do you want to do with lending, Charisse?" I'm like, "Huh, I really don't know if I enjoy that at all because I like the real estate, I like meeting with people, but when it comes to numbers, like you make a mistake, it's $1 million fine and 5 years in jail for something minor, right?" So I'm thinking that's kind of scary, and so I'm like, "Okay, well, I want to do 10." And he goes, why? And I said, I don't know. It sounds good. It sounds like 10's not very much. He's like, let's come back. Let's just not even put a number there right now. Let's focus on this. I'm like, okay, that sounds even better. So I think that we have to make sure that yes, you push yourself where it challenges you, but it doesn't overwhelm you right now. Because if you have all these balls, I was talking to someone yesterday, I'm like, I have all these balls up in the air, and I used to be really good at juggling them, but a lot of them are dropping now. So that's where you have to reevaluate because are you making the most of the time that you have, and is there a purpose for what you're trying to do? So
Absolutely. And I would say also with the pitching, so I do have these goals and I have all these things around it, but even taking a couple steps back,
right.
I have a real purpose for my pitching. And I
Mhm.
think that's, I'm not just pitching to pitch.
Mhm.
I'm doing it because I have specific article ideas I want to
Right.
get out there.
Yep.
I want to develop my expertise online or in magazines as, this is my expertise, this is what I do. And I love writing the articles and I love having them out there and I love the audience when people read them. it's just this beginning part I don't like. And I was, because when you were saying like, here's this thing you were considering doing and you were going to do this number of them and then sort of decided, oh, maybe I won't do that at all. I think that is so useful. That is so important, because I think it's so easy to take things on because we should for some reason, but then kind of going back to evaluate, well, why? What is actually the most important? What is the core value and action that you really want?
Right.
Is key. My book, The Writer's Roadmap, is all about that.
Mhm.
Because I mean, I think creative people in general tend to be squirrel minded, but with, when people ask me like, are you done writing? You're never done writing. There's always another book. There's always another article. There's always another idea. Yeah. I like that squirrel minded. So I'm saying, all right, well, let's focus. And in my book, I really talk about like, have 3 goals. I break it down into an OGSM, objectives, goals, strategies, and measures, which I heard about it from a women's business group I was in years ago, which is like this, it's this format for a sort of a business plan for small businesses. And so the goals are projects, basically. So the objective is your 1-sentence overview of everything that you want that contains your core values. Right. And I think that's really important to have first, because how are you supposed to know how much you want to pitch if you don't know what you're pitching for, or what would serve you?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times we get caught up in the strategies, which are really a to-do list. We get caught up in all the things we are going to do and the types, oh, I'm going to take these pictures and get headshots, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, but without actually attaching it to a project. I'm definitely guilty of this 100%. It's why I wrote that book, because I started doing the things that I write about in the book, and I was like, oh my God, focus. I focus on 3 things. And then I have a back burner list. And I always say to people, if you only focus on 3 things, you're going to want to do more. But if you focus on 3, you will get to your back burner list much faster than you think you will.
Yeah. There was a time I had 10 coaching programs, and I don't think I got through any of them because there's just too much. And that's an exaggeration. It was probably 5, but still it's the same thing is I got to do this. I got to do this. And you sit in this paralysis of, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start, instead of like, okay, you know what, today I'm only going to do this, and you get it done. That's great. Now let's move to this one, and let's move. The 12-week year is kind of like that, where you break an entire year into 12 weeks and you only do focus on 2 or 3 things. And then if, once you get those done for those 12 weeks, or if you get it done sooner, great. And then you focus on these 3 things. So yeah, overwhelm is not a good thing sometimes, because overwhelm's good if it's pushing you to do things, but if it's creating more chaos, then you got to back it up and say, I don't know about that. So, okay. Last question.
Sure.
If you are sitting on a park bench and you sit next to your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give that person?
I would say, I mean, it sounds so cliche, but just stop worrying about the things that you're worrying about. Go ahead and do it. You can.
Right.
You can do those things.
I love that.
I think it's as simple as that.
It is. Kind of like in high school where you wanted to ask someone out, but you were afraid of what they'd say. Like, hello. That's, I think, my one thing. If you could go back, who cares? If they say no, so what? At least you don't have a regret, right? And so that's the thing. Don't worry about failing. Don't worry about not being the best at something. Just do your best. And if you can look in the mirror and you say, great, I'm happy with who I am, then that's what's worth it. So I love that. And it's not cliche. It's just a fact.
Yeah. I mean, we do hold ourselves back. I think it's very easy for us to say like, oh, I don't have enough of X, Y, or Z yet. I have to wait. Yeah. But there's no need to wait. I don't think waiting serves us. Obviously in some ways, yes. But when it comes to writing, when it comes to creative endeavors, when it comes to trying something new, waiting doesn't necessarily make it better.
No, that's true. Okay, so how do people find you if they want to get a hold of you?
All right, so the 2 best places are, you can find me on Instagram, where my name is the Leigh Shulman, but I also have a page for podcast listeners, and it's leishulman.com. So it's my leishulman.com/podcast. And when you'll get there, there's a welcome to the community, and any questions that you have, there's a way to contact me. And then I'm also offering for anyone who would like to talk about their writing or has a book idea that you would like to write and kind of want to figure out, well, what's the next step? You can sign up for a coaching session. And, you'll put in your information, and then, I'll get back to you to be like, hey, let's meet at this time. And we can talk more about what it is that you want, where you want to go, what gets in the way, whatever is useful for you to talk about, so that we can get you from where you are now to your next step, to do that one thing to get you to your next step and kind of come up with a plan for your writing.
Well, Leigh, you have been an absolute delight to talk to. And congratulations for everything that you've done. So thank you very much.
And thank you.
Listeners, Unbreakable Moms, if you have an idea out there that you've always thought, I think I want to write a book, then please contact Leigh. Get started. And there's so many free resources, not only on your website, but that it's not worth stopping and holding yourself back. Just get started. And that goes for anything in your life. So you go make it a great day. Beautiful moms, remember, you are unbreakable. Keep illuminating the world with your strength, pursuing your dreams, and reveling in the splendor of motherhood. This is Charisse Walker, bidding you farewell for now. Stay tuned for more empowering conversations on the next episode of the Unbreakable Mompreneurs podcast. Until then, keep shining bright. Signing off with love, Charisse Walker.